Good evening and welcome. I want to thank everyone out there in virtual world for joining us this evening. My name is Khadijah Mohammed and I am the director for the Office of Parent Engagement with the Rochester City School District. And tonight's parent workshop is brought to you by Office of Parent Engagement, Rochester City School District, and the Urban League Black Scholar Program. Our forum tonight is going to be a panel style discussion with our superintendent, Dr. Meyer Small, our director of student support services, Ms. Crystal Clark, our school counselor at East Upper, Ms. Stephanie Bliss, our executive director of health and athletics, Dr. Carlos Cotto, our former student, Unique Fair Smith, and our parent, Donna M. Jones. Our panel will be moderated by Mrs. Shawanda Evans. First, we will have a short presentation from our Director of Student Support Services. Crystal?
Good evening, everyone. As Khadijah stated, my name is Crystal Clark. I am the Director of Student Support Services for the Rochester City School District, and I work with our wonderful school counselors throughout our district. Today, I wanted to meet with you all to introduce you to our college landing page. This was specifically made for students and families as a one-stop shop to be able to help you and support you with your college needs. I am now going to share my screen to give you a quick tour of our page. So in order to get to this page, you go to www.rcsdk12.org/college ready. And this page, as I stated, is dedicated to students and families with college readiness resources. I am going to scroll to the bottom. If you look over in this section, this is the planning and preparation section for you all. Listed is our school counselor directory. So if you need any support or have questions in regards to the college process, you can look up the school counselor at your child's school to be able to get support. We also have Naviance, a college and career planning platform. With this platform, students in grades 6 through 12 are introduced to college and career readiness activities, 3 activities per grade level per year, to help prepare students for their next step towards college and career. Via this platform, students can also tour colleges virtually, as well as set up appointments with reps to talk about their college options and what they would like to see. School counselors also have access to this web portal to be able to send pertinent documents to colleges on behalf of students. We also have our senior launch guide. This is a guide that was created with Rochester City School District and RIT. This guide provides students and families with step-by-step directions on their next steps after high school. So whether you're going to a 2-year college, a 4-year college, you're interested in a career right after high school and or military, this guide will give you the steps you need to tell you what your options will be. The college application process. Here we have the Common App for historically Black colleges and universities. We also have the Common App that provides you with access to several different colleges, as well as the SUNY app. So many of our scholars use one of these apps to apply for college. Below is a link to our FAFSA-thon. So students have the ability to be able to get financial aid, AKA free money for college. So in order to help students do that, we are putting together 3 FAFSA-thons, Saturday, November 14th, Saturday, December 5th, and Saturday, January 16th. And this is going to be via a platform similar to Zoom, where families can call in and get one-on-one support with applying for financial aid and other resources. Below that is our financial aid and scholarship area. Here there is a session from MCC that basically walks you through step by step the whole entire financial aid process. We also have the financial aid application listed here, as well as scholarship databases. If you look over in this section, we have different videos where we have college panel videos from our local colleges that basically help you through your processes in terms of college. We also have overview for Naviance for our platform to show you how to use that to be able to help the students become college ready, and different series as it relates to students of color. So as I stated, if you guys have any questions or concerns related to the college process, please utilize this platform to be able to help you. And again, you can meet with your school counselor if you have questions or concerns. I am now going to turn it back over to Khadijah.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. It's a lot of useful information that we have right on our website at RCSD. We wanted to make sure that we took the time to kind of walk you through that. Sometimes websites can be a little bit overwhelming, but the host of materials and resources that we have is something that we definitely want to share with our families. So now, without further ado, we are going to get into our panel discussion for tonight. Our moderator is Mrs. Shawanda Evans. Ms. Evans, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ms. Muhammad, for that introduction. Once again, we have 5 esteemed panelists that are joining us this evening that I'm sure will bring a rich dialogue. So we're going to jump right in. Our first question will be directed towards our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Leslie Myers-Small. Prior to giving the question, Dr. Myers-Small, can you please just share with our audience, if you can give a brief overview of what the role of the Superintendent of Schools is and how long you've served in that profession?
Sure. Good evening to everyone. I am Leslie Myers-Small, and I proudly serve as the Superintendent for Rochester City School District. While I've only been in this role for a little over 5 months, I previously served for almost 8 years as the Superintendent of Schools for Brockport Central School District, which is just to the west of Rochester. I've been in education almost 30 years, and I actually started my educational career as a high school counselor. So this is really in my wheelhouse. But the role of the superintendent is to basically be the chief executive officer and oversee all operations. And that includes the fiscal operations, the academic operations, to ensure that teaching and learning is occurring with fidelity, to make sure that students have the programs, the services that they need. The superintendent interacts with the Board of Education regularly, and I'm usually interacting with them formally at least once a week at Board of Education meetings, but more informally to follow up and respond to questions or concerns that they may have. The superintendent also, when schools are in session, are in schools with students and with teachers, and it's important for the superintendent to be visible. The superintendent also is actively involved usually in their school community. So I'm regularly interacting with the mayor and with the county executive, with other elected officials, working in the business community to figure out how to strengthen that school to career pipeline. I work very regularly with faith-based institutions, and we have some great partnerships there. So really just providing that main oversight for the district and hopefully moving it forward in the right direction. So it's a very, very busy job. On average, I work about 14 to 16 hours a day and weekends.
Thank you so much for providing us with that overview.
Sure.
The first question that we have for you, Superintendent Myers-Small, what are the main barriers that prevent parents from being involved in their children's high school?
Sure. So this is a multifaceted response to this question. I think there are a few things, but certainly not limited to the responses that I'm giving. Certainly schools can be barriers to getting parents involved. If we don't make the school navigatable for parents, right? So one, we get caught up in a lot of educational jargon, right? So we talk about IEPs and SATs, and we have our own kind of alphabet soup. And so we need to just really open up and make sure that our language is certainly inclusive of parents and caregivers. We also need to ensure that we offer programming for parents that is at different times during the day. Normally, we only offer programs between like 5 and 8. That seems to be kind of the magic 2 or 3 hours. But we have parents for whom they might only be able to get to school at 7 early in the morning or around lunchtime, or not until late in the evening. So we need to really open up schools and make sure that they are more palatable for parents. I think another barrier to parent involvement certainly could be cultural differences, right? And making sure that there is congruence and that we're acknowledging the rich culture and diversity that our students bring to school every single day. Another barrier that could prevent parents from being involved is if there are language barriers. If we're only offering programming in English, and Rochester City School District has very rich diversity as far as multiple languages being spoken. So it's important for us to make sure that important documents are translated in the languages that our students and particularly their parents speak. I think another barrier could be some of our parents and caregivers didn't have a good experience themselves in school. And so there could be some school phobia or just an avoidance to just say, well, I didn't have a good experience, so it's going to prevent me from coming. And so again, we have to make it much more inclusive. I think also on the flip side could be staff attitudes towards parents can be a barrier to parent and caregiver involvement. And I think just the final thing that might be a barrier is the difficulty that might be involved, or feeling embarrassed that they can't help their own child with their homework and with their schoolwork. For me, when I hit 7th grade, it was very difficult because I didn't know at the time, but my mom had dropped out of school around that time. And so it was very difficult for her to help me with homework. However, I didn't know that. She didn't say she couldn't help me with my homework. She said, you know what? It's really important for you to do the work. So I will sit here and be a cheerleader with you and stay up as late as I need to with you. But, you really need to do the work. So we just, as schools and as districts, we need to make sure that we are not putting that barrier up that prevent parents from feeling included, from feeling welcomed, and feeling celebrated from where they come from and from their cultural and heritage. So those are just a few barriers that I thought I would mention. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is directed to Ms. Stephanie Bliss, who's a school counselor at East High School with the Rochester City School District. Ms. Bliss, sometimes people misinterpret the duties of a school counselor. Could you please describe your main duties to our audience today?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, everybody. So this question is loaded because the misinterpretation is not often misinterpreted, because I often say that school counselors are the heartbeat. So that means everything goes through us, right? So we are responsible for 3 major domains, which is social emotional development, academics, and then career and college counseling. That's everything at school. There's nothing that doesn't fall under one of those domains. So also, scholars have access to a school counselor, K through 12, right? So if you ever need anything for your scholar, more likely than not, it's important to contact your school counselor. Now, we may not have the direct answer, but we always can filter it. So I think that's where the misconception comes, or people may say, well, no, that's not what you do, but it may not necessarily be exactly what we do when it comes down to preparation for college and career, or the social emotional development and counseling of our scholars, or helping them prepare academically for their future, but we can get them to where they need to be, even if it has anything to do with outside resources or community involvement and all of those other things. So if you think about the heartbeat, everything has to go through that. And so that's what school counselors are. And the best thing about our district is that all scholars have access to one. So I think that is really important for our families. If you don't know your school counselor, especially at the high school level, please get to know him or her, because that's going to be detrimental to your success after high school and while you're in high school. And even if you're in middle school and elementary school, it may not be the same involvement as it is in high school, but it's really important to connect with your school counselor. So to answer that question, we kind of do it all, and it's okay, because that's what we signed up for.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bliss. Our next question is directed to one of our parent panelists, Ms. Donna Jones. Ms. Jones, what type of presence did you have with your children's high school teachers, school counselors, and administrators? And if positive, what was your approach in building the relationships with the high school staff?
Thank you so much, Ms. Evans. First, I'd like to say I am the proud parent of 3 Rochester Urban League Black scholars, one of which was the first individual from Russian Henrietta to be admitted to MIT. She has since graduated with her master's degree in electrical engineering and computer science, the second of which who is a senior at UB, and the third that is a junior at Brockport, SUNY Brockport. So I'm so proud of them. Now, the answer to the question, presence is key. I would start with that first open house, and I would go and meet each of their teachers. And then I would be sure to return any paperwork packets that the teachers sent out, because they're looking for information about our children, and who better than the parent to get it from. And then in those information packages, I ensured that I had email contact with each teacher, because if something came up throughout the school year, then I could simply shoot them an email and they would shoot me a response back. Now, in addition to that, I participated in a plethora of activities. So they'd have Engineers Week. Being an engineer, I would go in, I'd speak for Career Day. They've had Martin Luther King celebrations where they've done choral things and they've done dance routines. I've assisted with those. I chaperoned on school trips. A couple of the years I participated on the PTA, and I would always go in and support with teacher appreciation and any parent support, fundraisers, anything that they would have. So I was fortunate in that I remained in the same school district for all 3 children. So once I built that relationship with the bulk of the administrators at the high school, when the second and the third child came through, they already knew who I was. And so it made it easy for us to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. And some of the key points that you really pulled out were really just making those connections early on, making sure that you have the contact information and getting involved in the levels that you're comfortable with your child or your children's school. Thank you so much for sharing that information. Our next question is directed to Dr. Carlos Cotto, who's the Executive Director of Physical Education, Athletics, and Health with the Rochester City School District. Dr. Cotto, before we get into your question, if you can just share with us a brief overview about your role within the district and also how long you've served in that profession.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Carlos Santos Jr. I oversee health, education, physical education, athletics for the Rochester City School District. What that job entails is instructional. So I'm the instructional leader that oversees about 15 to 17 or 9 administrators, 4 athletic trainers, 1 health coordinator. And as a team, we oversee the entire department. What that entails, again, is instruction. It also focuses on athletics. As a district as a whole, everything is funded through the department as a whole. So coaching, equipment, supplies, networking with the community as well, and bridging that gap around the resources that are within the community. So I do a lot with the City of Rochester recreation programs, a lot of foundations within the community as well. Again, leveraging that support to our students as a whole, focusing on the whole child. So within my department, we call it the essential cores because it builds on the core. And it's just as important in reference to the overall social and emotional well-beings of our students. So creating that kind of balance and knowing that if our students are doing well in the classroom and we're able to provide them with that enrichment outside of the classroom, we provide that holistic experience for our young men and young ladies within the community as a whole. That's just a little bit of what takes place within the department. Professional development, ordering of supplies, networking and communicating with the community as a whole. I've been in this position here for 13 years. I've been in the district for 22. I am not from the Rochester community. I moved here in '98 with the intent of 1 year of experience, and I've been up here ever since. Married with three beautiful children, and really love what I do and enjoy working with the young men and women of this community.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The question I have for you, Dr. Cotto, is what our athletic directors ask the most in regards to college readiness?
So I would say the one question that's asked the most of our athletic directors, especially from our student athletes, is how can we play at the next level? Many of our young men and young ladies, no different than myself, have the dream of playing college and professionally. So I think that question is heavy in reference to how we go about approaching it in that of the conversation. Our young men and our young ladies, as they share this interest, we then speak to them around the NCAA Clearinghouse, which is the portal to transition from high school to college sports. The NCAA stands for National Collegiate Athletic Association. The Clearinghouse is an essential step in becoming eligible to play at the college level. And there's over 180,000 students that have that same interest that register every year. So sharing that with our student athletes is important, having them understand that many individuals have that dream of playing at the next level. And what's interesting in reference to this particular question is that there are requirements, and those requirements are heavily focused on academics. So having students understand the importance of maintaining, as it relates to the clearinghouse, they have to have a minimum of a 2.3 GPA. Along with that, they have to score about a 900 on the SAT or a 75, some score of a 75 on the ACT, which is some test that they take as they transition out of high school. But what's important in that is that having students understand that if they're able to balance their academic and athletics as a whole, that when you put those two things together, then the opportunities that come about for those young men and young ladies are endless. So trying to have students understand that although that dream is to play, what is that plan? What is that plan as you transition, and what's your backup plan? So taking that information as they ask this question and having it grounded on the importance of staying focused in the classroom and making sure that they start early in understanding, the importance of doing their homework, coming to school on time. But on top of that, it's also, what are they learning as individuals as they participate in sports programs around leadership, character, citizenship, and understanding that those things also play a role in that career opportunity to transition into college programs. Because a coach, if indeed you're being scouted as an athlete within this community and you're maintaining, let's say, a minimum of B's and A's and doing well on the playing field, coaches and scouts are coming to this community to see those other aspects of leadership, not necessarily your talent, but more or less how are you coming off that bus, how are you interacting with your peers, how are you handling that adversity on the playing field. So it's important to have our young men and young ladies understand that they're a walking interview. If they've got the dream to play at that next level, then it starts as early as elementary school, and they build upon all of those factors and that of what transition into life as they transition into programs that they're offered throughout their journey as elementary, middle, and high school students. One quote that I'm going to take from a counselor, which is Ms. Sisms, who's a counselor at Wilson Foundation, is if you don't hit the books, you don't get the looks. So as we have this conversation with our young men and young ladies, we ground it in having them understand that if they focus heavily on that academic piece and their character and their citizenship, that the chances of them attaining these type of dreams and goals, at least transitioning from high school to college, can be attained. But they've got to stay grounded in their plan, so that they can accomplish and have those opportunities in front of them. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So one follow-up question for you, Dr. Cotto. If I'm a student athlete watching this presentation, or a parent of a student athlete watching this presentation, where do I start? If I'm looking to play in the collegiate level, who should be my first point of contact at the high school site?
So I would start, if you're participating in sports, and it'd be your coach. If not your coach, your athletic director. Every one of our high schools has an athletic director on site at the high school, a counselor as well. So we do have a counselor and an AD that are part of a team to connect with our families as a whole. You can also reach this department here. You know, the number to this office is 262-8281. And we will be putting together we do what we call the Journey of a Scholar Athlete. It's an event that we kind of present the clearinghouse. We share that information with our scholars across the district as a whole. And we bring former athletes back to Rochester, and we have them sit on a panel discussion to share their journey. And what happens within that conversation, it provides that lived experience of athletes, because although we grounded on the importance of hitting those books, sometimes many of our athletes lose sight of that importance. And these young men and young ladies that we brought back to speak of that, speak very heavily on, wow, if I only had done this, I would have been here. And the great thing about the individuals that we do bring is that they've taken, their journey has been different to get to what they want to accomplish, but they've gotten there. And they provide a wealth of information in reference to their experience as a whole. I will provide this information. This event is going to be on Wednesday, November 18th from 4 to 5:30. It will be a virtual presentation. So that's just one other way to inform the community as a whole.
Thank you so much for that information. Our next question is directed towards our college student panelist, Mr. Unique Fair, who's currently a student at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Unique, if you can share just a little bit about your program of study that you're enrolled in at the institution, as well as any other clubs or organizations that you may be a part of prior to getting into our first question for you.
All right. Let me start by saying thank you again for having me involved. It's a privilege to come back and always put it forward for our community. My name's Unique Fair. I was a student at World of Inquiry High School. I graduated in 2015, and I was able to attend RIT on the Dessler Scholarship for RCSD students who attend RIT, being a full ride scholarship that's available to any student who gets accepted into RIT from our school district. After that point, I pursued a bachelor's in illustration and graduated in 2019, and came back for my master's in fine arts. I'm currently in my second year of my fine arts program, and I'm currently teaching classes as well as finishing out my thesis. Basically, overall, my work has been leading more toward community activism and other things. My local involvement has been a lot of overlapping with other students of color on campus and really finding means and ways for us to be accessible and for us to create work that enables us to feel empowered and have a control of our narrative on campus and in the wider world around us.
Thank you so much for that. The question, Mr. Fair, is if you can think back to your 9th grade year in high school at World of Inquiry, what was your high school experience in determining your path to college?
I would say my school's philosophy really stuck with me. I attended the school since 1st grade, and one of our things we have is a crew pledge. And part of the crew pledge is a reoccurring theme is this idea of exploring diverse ideas and concepts. So in 9th grade, on my general high school experience, a really privileged opportunity I had was attending a place that really encouraged you to explore multiple directions and to find areas that really explored your interest and gave you room to develop really a fascination and see where that led. For me, that really led into the arts. I was able to create work that really enabled me to speak to people and reach out to them in ways that I didn't feel I could do in other means. It helped me be a difference in the world and kind of the change I wish to see in the world. And that really led me to my work when I was 14 in ninth grade that really ultimately gave me a sense of fulfillment and happiness, and also gave me an ability to engage and help improve my community around myself. From there, it was really World of Inquiry's philosophy that gave me the ability to work with my art and have a faculty and other professors that really supported me. I had my art teachers, Teresa Funk, who was really accepting of my goals to attend college for the arts, and continue to develop artwork, and really specified my experience in her class to best help me pursue that goal. And that's really one thing I can come back to and say is that regardless of my own experience and several of my other classmates that I know very closely to this day, we all have very distinct paths. And what really benefited me was that regardless of the paths we chose, our professors were very apt and capable of helping direct us in the most effective means for pursuing and succeeding.
Thank you so much for that. Our next question is for Superintendent Myers-Small. Dr. Small, how important is it for parents to be involved with their children's high school, and why does it have a positive effect on student achievement?
Sure, thank you for that question. It is critically important, and I think I just shared just with the example of my mom being involved with me and the difference that it made. But there's lots of research that's out there that speaks to parent and caregiver involvement. And much of the research really shows that there is a consistent positive relationship that exists between a child's education as well as student outcomes. Studies have also shown that parental and caregiver involvement is associated with particular student outcomes such as lower dropout rates and truancy rates. When a school community sees that a parent or caregiver is involved, it really gets them to kind of come to attention. I mean, if I know that a parent is regularly and actively involved, as an educator, it means that I have to, we should be saying that we're giving our students our very best all the time. So that goes without saying, but it really shows, listen, I'm going to come to school. I'm going to ask you how my child is doing. I'm going to participate in parent conferences. I'm going to participate in parent events. It just shows the school that the parent is actively involved, and that parent is truly vested. I think the problem, though, gets that if for some reason we don't see a parent physically attending an event, we think that maybe that the parent doesn't care. So I really want to shift this question. I think Khadijah would appreciate this. It really is about parent engagement and making sure that the parent is engaged in their child's life. Because again, some parents and caregivers cannot make it to every single event and physically attend parent-teacher conference, curriculum nights, etc. So I would rather see a parent who, as you know, and I'm a former school counselor, Miss Bliss, I was at Wilson. I wanted to see the parent who would reach out to me and just say, back then I was Miss Myers, tell me what's going on with my child, or I'm concerned because there's some things that are going on. I'm noticing changes in mood, or I'm noticing that the grades are slipping, or they're not engaging with the family like they normally do. I want to hear that type of information rather than seeing the parent every day at the school or at every single event that we offer. So that's really important for me, that the parents are engaged. And how do parents get engaged? They know who the principal is. They know who their child's assistant principal is. They know who the school counselor is. And they don't wait until there's a problem to actively engage with the school counselor, right? There's a parent who's very connected to the Urban League, Joan Moorhead, who retired not too long ago from MCC. I was her daughter's school counselor, and Mrs. Moorhead held me accountable to do and be the best for her daughter. So she would pick up the phone and say, hey, are there any scholarships? I know she's just a 9th grader, but is there anything that we should be doing right now? How should we be? She is going to college. So how should we be engaging with colleges and universities? When do we start going on college tours and talking to college admissions representatives? So that's the type of parent and caregiver that you want to be, is that you're engaging with the school, you're checking in, and you're not just waiting until things aren't going well or things are going wrong, but you want to just regularly be engaged with the school. Know that there's 4 report cards, right? It would blow my mind how many times I would maybe get a call in the spring and say, when's the report card coming? I'm like, we've already had 3 or 2. So no, when is the report card? So how do you engage as a parent? Go on the website. Every school and district has lots of information loaded. We pay money to have the webmaster updated and put all of our information up there. Know when school starts and ends. And I know that might sound simple, but you know, our children can be very creative and tell us things that aren't so. And then especially being in a remote environment, school is still happening. So know when that schedule is for your child. You know who the support and resources are. Is it the school counselor or who's the social worker? Who's the school psychologist? If your child is receiving special education services, right? How do you engage and have conversations? So it's all those types of things that you don't necessarily physically have to be present at school, but you get yourself acquainted with knowing what is involved with your child and how to help your child should there be trouble. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that and providing some specific examples on how we can continue to engage with our K through 12 systems. Our next question is for our counselor, Ms. Bliss. Based on your professional experience, what do you think is the best way parents can track their child's academic development to be ready for college in their senior year?
Yes, thank you. I think that I just want to say I was nodding my head the whole time Dr. Myers-Small was talking, because that is just so critical. Please just reach out. One phone call can make such a huge difference. And so in my professional experience, one thing that parents can do is start early, right? And not wait until senior year to start talking about college. Start in elementary school. Start having that conversation of what do you want to do? What are some options? What are you interested in? Michelle Obama says we're becoming. So just think about your interests. What will you do for free is what I ask my scholars. Okay, now let's figure out a way to get paid for it, right? What are your passions? What are your like, what are those things? So once parents are in tune with what their scholars' likes and dislikes and future goals are, then start tracking ways to get there, right? So I think we have to have the goal first and then figure out the way to get to the goal. So I would say the communication is critical in knowing who, what, when, where, and why at the school level. Also, especially at high school, that freshman year, knowing what it takes to graduate from high school, right? We're not getting to college if we're not graduating from high school. So sitting down with the counselor, figuring out what are the graduation requirements? What does college ready actually look like, right? Is what Regent score should we be aiming for? What core score should we be aiming for? What does that academic progress look like? When can we start introducing APs or dual credit courses? Things of that nature if college is the goal. Also talking about careers, right? So what do you want to do? And then really figuring out how to get there. I know we're talking about college, but I never want to diminish the career side, right? So you may go into career development and not necessarily have to go on to the 4-year college. And that's okay and it's valuable. And not feeling a way about not getting to the collegiate level just yet. We want to value those things too. We want to value our electrical, our plumbers, and all of that other stuff that is super, super valuable. And they all need a plan, and they all have to graduate from high school first. So really sitting down with your scholar first and really figuring out what you need, what they actually want to do, and then figuring out what it takes to get there. And that's through various mediums. That's using the internet on your own, that's sitting with your school counselor, that's working with your coaches to say, what do I have to do for my next level? That's talking to your peers or older siblings to say, what do they actually have to do? But really connecting and having the goal and figuring out the steps to get there. Because it's more than just senior year. And what happens often is that college talk sometimes comes a little late. And so we don't want that to happen. We want that to come in the gate. This year I have freshmen, and with COVID, we're not doing what I normally do, but by this time we would have been on a college campus because we always go somewhere in October early. So now we're doing the virtual college tours, but starting early. And for me, because I have 9th grade, it's starting at 9th grade, and you will not leave me saying that you haven't had a collegiate experience. So that's super, super, super important.
Thank you, Ms. Bliss. One quick follow-up question to that. I know you talked about potentially meeting with the high school counselor, the middle school counselor, to see where your child is to get a better understanding of the high school graduation requirements. Are there specific templates or systems, electronic systems that you're utilizing that parents have access to be able to track and monitor how their child is doing and what courses they need to take in order to graduate from high school?
Great follow-up question. Absolutely. Every scholar has a 4-year plan. And sometimes that's altered depending on the scholar, right? So some are saying, I have freshmen right now, I want to graduate in 3 years. Okay, we're going to plan it out. So this is what that looks like, and this is what you have to do. And then they're like, oh, okay. So every scholar has a 4-year plan. It starts in 9th grade. And it's every school is a bit different in how it's executed. But right now with the remote learning, we're forced to do everything digitally. And that's the benefit right now of not being in school, is that now we're creating all of these interactive templates to be able to share with families because we're not physically with our kids and can do it on paper and just hand them the paper. So yes, every scholar has a 4-year plan, and I encourage parents that are listening to reach out to your school counselor to get access to that plan. It should be very simple for them to email you what it looks like currently, what the graduation requirements are, and what plan your scholar is on, whether they're on the advanced Regents track, regular Regents track. Also, make sure that that you are using the parent portal app to look into that, to say what grades do they have now, what credits have they earned, where are we going. Parents have access to so much information now in 2020 that we are so digitally inclined. And I know Ms. Jones can probably speak to maybe not having that kind of access. But at some point, I know when I was at East, my parents didn't have digital access. This was in the 90s, that wasn't available. And so now parents have so much more access to information via parent portal, via websites, via all of these different mediums. That the engagement should be much easier now than it was in the past.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that was a perfect segue into my next question for Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones, you shared that you have multiple children that went through the Rochester City School District. So with those different children, there are different competing needs. How did you as a parent, or what are some ways that you proactively kept track of your children's academic progress throughout high school?
Thank you, Ms. Bliss, for that perfect lead in. That parent portal, it was available then, and that was my friend. I actually would take my lunch break and I would check in, because you got to realize when you're dealing with 9th, 10th, 11th graders, they're beginning to come into their own. So they want to have some autonomy. But what I would do is I would look over lunch and I would see what's due this week. You know, who's got what due, when is it due? If I wanted to understand what was going on with the grades, I could look in the parent portal. And then at dinner, when we came together at dinner, I would ask them, okay, what do you need to get done this week? You know, or what's got to be accomplished today? Early in the week, we do the week, right? And then that way I could kind of help keep them on track. I had 3 different kids. They are all different styles. My oldest one needed minimal tracking. The other 2, some of them one of them I had to help with some studies. The other one was more independent. So you have to know your child, but that parent portal. And then like Dr. Myers-Small said earlier, you need to stay and engage and reach out to the teacher. If there was something that I thought was fishy or didn't look right, I'd contact the teacher via email. And the teacher and I would have and I might not necessarily be able to get into the school that day, but they can answer my question via email. So I did a lot of checking the parent portal at lunchtime, understanding where each child was, and then in the evening, validating with that child, keeping them on track, just checking to make sure that their plan was straight to ensure that they stayed on track.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ms. Jones. Our next question is directed to Mr. Fair. Can you describe your interactions with high school staff and the lessons you learned over those 4 years?
Yes, I can, and thank you. There was something Miss Bliss brought up that I thought really spoke to my experience, the idea of thinking with the end in mind and working toward it, effectively a road to victory. My experience with my professors generally was very much fitted around this idea of where do I want to see myself in 4 years? What is my plan at that point? And then working from the end goal and taking a step back and saying, what do I need to be before I get there? And what do I need to be before I get to that point? And working myself all the way down to where I was at the time, and then systematically going through and hitting all those boxes until I got to the point where I wanted to be. In that case, my situation was wanting to be a illustration major at RIT for my freshman year. I was fortunate enough to achieve that. And one of the ways that was improved was directly through my interactions with my professors. They were very open to the idea of what I wanted to do, and they very much adapted my experience at school to directly meet the needs of my higher education goals. And that existed in a lot of different ways. We talked a bit about students coming on campus. My professor, Ms. Funk, she was the one who brought me onto campus for the first time at RIT's campus. And I was able to find out about the scholarship I would inevitably use to attend RIT. I'm actually currently speaking to you all from the room I found that scholarship out about 6 years ago. So, well, 8 years ago, actually. So where things ultimately end up is really fascinating. But as well, the ability for my professors to say, okay, here's what you need to do, and here's ways we can help you achieve that and above. That resulted in me, sometimes spending my lunches working with other professors, or taking additional work that required history research, or completing additional projects. My professors were able to spend time developing things like my curriculum, where for my art program in 12th grade, my art class, I was able to I talked to my professor, and she basically said I was able to use that time to best develop my portfolio for applying for art schools. And I was also able to use that time to pursue understandings of what I could do with illustration, where that would lead my career, and over time what I could do to make sure that when I got to college, I could also, in my freshman year, create an additional road to victory, and then work backwards from there to where I was in freshman year, and continue the process of systematically achieving my goals as I worked through my years in my undergrad. So ultimately, that experience really came down to a faith in my ability. They genuinely were able to understand where I was coming from, where I was going, and they did everything in their power to help me move forward. And that really built me they gave me the resources and time in ways you don't normally consider. I was developing a portfolio for one of my classes, and one of the requirements was a still life, which is basically, a lot of people look at them and think apples and vine glasses and things like that. one of my projects required me to use a skull. So I talked to my science professor and he let me borrow some of the skulls in his science class to then do art projects with, which is a very weird combination of overlap. However, they were understanding enough that when given the opportunity to describe why it was important, they were able to do that for me and fit it in a way that allowed me to continue to excel in high school and prep myself for my college career.
Thank you so much. The next question I have is going to be for Ms. Bliss. If you can just share with us, what types of support services does your office or the school district provide that may be beneficial to students and parents? So maybe academic, college, or career services.
One thing I want to know from my last question too is that the parent portal is key, but also getting added to your scholars Google Classroom while we're in this remote learning is also key, because the parent portal is only as good as what the teachers put in to the system. And so because we're in the remote learning, we're using Google Classroom a lot, and some teachers are housing their grades in there and things of that nature. So if you can have access to both, you're golden. So with that, we have some amazing partnerships with our community based organizations that help us provide some of the things that we can't provide in-house, which is the tutoring and the mentoring and the community connectedness, because we all know that all it takes is one adult with one scholar to make such a huge difference. So that's one thing that I really pride RCSD on is our connections to the community. So that's a support service that we had. We have, I'm not sure about other districts, but having an office of parent engagement is critical, to where if you just don't know something, you can call an office that's directly for you as a parent to say, I'm a parent and I need X, Y, and Z. And that's what they're there for. That's a service that our district provides that I think is amazing and so responsive to the needs of our community. But then also our connections through the Rochester College Access Network, being able to provide on-site and in-house FAFSA information, to be able to have schools that are dedicated to college and career readiness programs. Our schools are so rich in that, having programs that are geared towards scholars that want to be teachers, scholars that want to go into culinary, having partnerships with BOCES and REOC and things of that nature. One thing, and I'll go back to that, and all of those things typically come through the school counselor's desk. So for us to be able to facilitate that out to scholars is critical in a great way. And looking at our new landing page for college to say, I can go to this one spot and look for college stuff. Hopefully we can come up with the landing pages for particular things, but just having all of those services through the school side and also the community side, and being able to have that one-stop shop through the school system is critical. Having student support centers in our schools where a lot of that stuff is filtered out too is also a great service that our schools provide, and those are housed in several of our high schools. And then also, I just want to highlight too our parent, our PTAs and PTSAs that are around the district, where parents can have a voice and students can have a voice, and what happens at their school level is also a critical service that I encourage parents to get engaged with in any way that they can, because that's where a lot of change happens, because that's your organization, that's not the school's organization, to say what you need and how you need it. So again, making sure that you have that voice at the school level is critical through those various avenues.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Superintendent Myers-Small. What are some of the best practices for parent engagement and community involvement that you've experienced in your career? I know you spoke about it a little bit earlier today. So if you can talk about things that you've seen and or initiatives that are taking place right within your district.
You know, I had a really powerful experience 2 weeks ago. We have something called the Bilingual Education Council, and it was created many, many years ago, actually in the 70s, to ensure that students who don't speak English as their first language have the supports that they need. And so I attended with one of my deputy superintendents, Melody Martinez Davis, and Glenn Vanderwater, who oversees information management and technology. We actually went to the Trenton Pamela Jackson Center over by school number 9 to engage with the families. And it was such a powerful experience for me because one, it was really getting into the community. I love that we do things at the recreation centers, the R centers, because it's places where people just naturally or normally meet and convene, and their children go there. So it's a comfortable place. But we had a really good opportunity to present the data on our bilingual programs and how many seats are available, who the principals are of schools where we have students who are bilingual. And it was so powerful because it took them away from having to come to district office or having to come to a school. And again, they convened in an area that was comfortable to them. But I have to tell you, and I had an interpreter because not all of our parents and caregivers speak English. And it was very humbling to participate in that experience because I was one of 2 people out of about 25 or so who didn't speak it, who only spoke English. And I had to halfway through the program say, you know, this is a humbling experience for me. And it's a good reminder of the importance of educational flexibility and patience with students who don't speak English as their first language. So getting outside of the traditional kind of the school environment or district office and going to places where people naturally go, I think works. I think certainly if, you know, there's a saying, what was it, Field of Dreams? They said, if you build it, they will come. Well, if you bring food, they will come. And so having foods that are fun and festive, I think are important. But I think I also shared offering times that are non-traditional for families to come and interact with school personnel is important. When I was an administrator in the Greece Central School District, we went into the housing complexes. And in Greece at that time, they had social workers attached to those places. And so we worked with the social workers. Our social workers worked with them. And we went in and we knocked on doors and we just talked about school and just resources that were available. So I think it's just about really thinking outside of the box and not just doing kind of the typical or normal things, or even asking parents and caregivers what would work for you. Because one of the things I learned a little bit like probably midway through my career is that we make the assumption that doing home visits are welcomed and that everybody is comfortable with a home visit. And not everyone is comfortable with a home visit. Some families don't want you to come into their space, and it can be just either there's just not a comfort level. There could be embarrassment because they have humble living accommodations or other things that we might not be aware of. There could be cultural or even religious situations. So it's just important for us to just even ask and say, hey, what would be comfortable for you, or how might we be able to connect? There's no hurt in asking.
You're muted, Shawanda.
So sorry about that. That brings me right back to you, Ms. Jones. I just want to ask you, where did you go to seek information about things that were going on within your school? And what were some of the most effective ways in order to connect to your children's school from your perspective as a parent?
Yeah, so the school counselor was key relative to connecting and understanding exactly what was happening with each child and where they were in their academic development. And then I did try to maintain a good relationship with each of my students' teachers. So, you know, we had the email contact, and then I kind of got to know each teacher and what was going on with them. And I shared with them things about me to see if there were ways that I would be able to interact with them and actually go into the classroom or come into the school to be a support.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Dr. Cotto. You spoke a little bit about this earlier, but if you can please just share with us, what are some of the academic requirements student athletes should focus on, and when should they start this process?
Sure. Well, I'll start with when they should start. I think the big thing is as early as elementary school. I think we as a community, if we can work with our community organizations, you know, for parents that are out there whose children participate in City Rec and some other programs, how do we leverage those resources that we have within the community to balance the academic end? So working together in supporting students, but also holding students as well as district accountable in making sure that students are doing well in the classroom, as far as attendance, as far as grades, as far as citizenship. So I think it starts at that foundation so that students pick up those habits early. So as they transition to middle school, they have those habits already instilled, and then it provides them with a much stronger opportunity to attain the dreams and goals that they have as individuals. But it does require us to work together within our community. I mean, Ms. Jones, as a parent, being heavily involved in communicating with the school, connecting the dots, and making sure that you're getting that information. I mean, Ms. Bliss, when it comes to the planning, the 4-year plan that Ms. Bliss shared, that's right aligned with even the NCAA information. So it's nothing different than what students should be planning prior to going into high school. But when we do speak of that overall dream, the clock starts ticking for any student once they begin taking credit-bearing courses. And that's for high school graduation, that's for college acceptance, and that's also for the NCAA. If we can instill all of those things early on, then as they transition, then going back to the young man in all of his planning and thinking forward, provides our students with a better kind of understanding of what their dreams and goals can be and all the planning that takes place prior to that. What's expected, you know, when we're looking at overall academics as far as NCAA, I mentioned it earlier around the GPA and the overall grades, but the NCAA is going to focus on the core classes, which is your English, your math, your social studies, science, and then languages other than English. Those are the core areas that they focus on. What I would strongly share with families, again, instilling those skills and strategies early, preparing them as early as 7th grade in reference to, let's say middle school, in reference to high school courses that they can take as early as 7th and 8th grade so that they're ahead of the game. But again, focusing on getting those grades up to basically a B or higher. So that way, if they're continuing that pattern early on and as they transition into middle school and high school, then it becomes part of their practice. Because ultimately, maintaining those Bs and striving for those A's are truly going to open up those opportunities in reference to going on to college. One, graduating. So the focus is graduating from high school. You know, as they focus on graduating from high school, it's then also making yourself marketable. So as I mentioned earlier, in reference to these experiences, one as a student, you know, scholar athlete, is conducting yourself as a true leader and mentor within your community as a whole, within the building, to lead others. When it comes to the playing field, it's the same thing, is replicating those same kind of skills that you learn on both sides, so that ultimately, you know, all doors will open and you'll have all the opportunities that you are striving to accomplish. I can almost guarantee if students have that athletic ability and if they maintain grades above a B, opportunities will become available, but they've got to stay focused on balancing both. Academics plus athletics equals success. Can't have one or the other. You've got to have a balance, and it's got to be heavier on focusing in that classroom, focusing on your character, your leadership, in order to attain those overall goals.
Thank you. My next question is for Unique. Our conversation today has really been around focusing on the whole child, engagement, support. So one question I have for you, Unique, is did you have any mentors outside of your high school besides your parents? And if so, kind of who were those individuals and how did that impact your future growth and success as a student?
Thank you. I was privileged to say I had many mentors outside of high school and even in middle school. My overall experience, especially when it came to extracurriculars in 7th grade, really began with a program called Youth as Resources. It was effectively a program where young students would go throughout the city of Rochester and really assess areas that needed certain assistance. And through the funding we received, we were able to help people apply for scholarships that would help grant for things that were like, if someone was interested in starting a garden in their local area, we would help give them the grant money to then develop that garden. And it was a really fascinating opportunity to really assess the needs of the city of Rochester, especially as it related to the student body. We were able to interact with people from every school and every neighborhood and seeing those overlaps and really understanding how fundamentally tied together we all are. It's very easy sometimes to look at World of Inquiry and see it as something different from School of the Arts or from any of the other schools in the district. And they're all their own organisms, but they are ultimately a part of the same organism. We all depend on each other in a lot of ways to create the best environment that's stable for the majority of us. And I find that YAR gave me that ability. I later was involved in a group, Youth Engaged in Service, which was an additional program that really seeked to explore political empowerment for students of color on campus, throughout the city of Rochester, and continue to really advocate for the needs of students, whether it came to coming onto campuses like Nazareth College and really working with them to realize what do students need? What are they falling short of achieving, and what can we aspire to add to their curriculums? I additionally in the case of mentoring, I was also very fortunate to encounter someone many of you are probably familiar with. His name is Michael Campbell. He was a mentor of mine I've had since my 7th grade year in a program called Rites of Passage. Rites of Passage being a mentoring program for students of color, especially focusing on giving them effective life skills through reflecting on traditional African principles, looking at things like the Nguzo Saba and the principles of Ma'at, and really adapting them to actualize our current path, looking at the past for answers toward our futures. I was fortunate enough to graduate through that program when I was 16, I believe, and I was fortunate enough again to come back and continue mentoring. So as an adult, currently I've mentored students in rec centers, detention centers, and schools. As well, I was fortunate enough to have several other mentors in a program called Cypher. It was an after-school arts program that was downtown, walking distance from my high school. It was really, really important at growing up. My mentors being Chris Pallas and Kevin Serwacki. They were alumni from RIT, which definitely helped me achieve my ability to attend here as a student, but as well, they were professional illustrators and artists who I could go to and talk to several times a week and say, hey, what are you working on? How does this affect the industry? What are you interested in doing? How is the market changing? And really ask them a lot about being business savvy, as well as working to be artistically acute in my abilities. That later also expanded into programs like SLC, which was the Student Leadership Congress. I was a student representative for World of Inquiry, basically working within the school district to meet the needs of students. And I was fortunate enough after that to become the student representative on the Board of Education for my senior year of high school. And overall, these programs, I could list a dozen more, but they really helped me actualize myself. They gave me an ability to identify with my interest in my well-being and advocate for them on a scale that empowered me then and gives me the skills I have now. Which is another point I want to also emphasize. For students currently who are listening, who are working through mentoring programs, this is an education that doesn't stop once you get to college or even after college, whatever those plans may be. I was fortunate enough to go through many mentoring programs, and after finishing them coming to college, one of the ones I was able to immediately incorporate myself into was called MOCA, which is Men of Color, Honor, and Ambition here at RIT. It is a phenomenal program, and it was something that really it furthered my education in my own understanding of self. It gave me room to grapple with my own being and explored things like public speaking and ways of engagement, and also practices to better engage leadership qualities and other abilities of collaboration. Really, these opportunities and things like that through mentoring or other programs are extraordinarily formative. And I would really wish as many as possible on the students in our city school district. We have brilliant people, both within the school district and in our neighborhoods, who would love to mentor students and really help them gain a sense of self that I was fortunate enough to develop in high school and middle school.
Thank you so much for sharing all those many opportunities and connections that you've had and continue to have while in college as well. And that brings me back over to Ms. Jones. If you can share with us, did your children participate in any programs outside of high school? And if so, how did these programs assist in your children's development?
They did. We found that activities outside of the school actually helped to round them. It's interesting, the first one that comes to mind is Nova Academy over at RIT. And there was another program where my son, he actually was breaking into computer games and changing them at a very young age. I'm talking like 9. So they had a programming summer camp that I put him in. So those things pushed them academically and allowed them to do things beyond what was actually happening in the classroom in the areas they were interested in. Then there are activities with fraternities and sororities. So Deltas have this program called Delta Gems. Both my girls participated there. The Alphas have a program where they take the young men to New York City, and they take them to a Broadway play, and they take them to a professional game, and they walk through a lot of some of the stuff I'm sure that Mr. Fair experienced with the MOCA program. They walk through the development of being a Black man, and they actually how to handle if you're stopped by a police officer, those kind of things. So lots of things. We did karate as a family, and we did that, to bond us closer together. But I found my kids are all small in size. They're very petite. And when they were young, they were being bullied. So we took the karate to give them self-confidence. So they got that from there. Then they participated in church activities. All 3 of my kids actually danced with the church dance ministry. And the 2 girls were leaders. They were junior leaders. They were head choreographers, participated on the worship team. So they're leading praise and worship. And my son, very much like Mr. Fair, is extremely artistic. And so he actually did some one-on-one work with David Haygood at his art studio. So just many different avenues of finding out things that they were interested in and allowing them to explore them. All 3 kids took music lessons, private music lessons. So it's definitely key in rounding them. You know, Dr. Cotto said citizenship and character and leadership. And those are the kind of things that they got from those programs outside of the school.
Thank you so much. My next question is directed to Ms. Bliss. With the many opportunities that are available to our students from advanced placement, IB, college-bearing courses in high school, what is the reward and risk in taking these courses while in high school?
So I thought a little bit about how to answer this question. And from my perspective, the risk a lot of times, especially for scholars that are on the road to IB and advanced courses, the risk is that it's not going to be easy. And typically, school has been easy for these scholars. And now when you're taking that upper level course, that's the risk that I find. They come to me and say, oh no, this is hard. I have to study, I have to read, I'm getting a B. I've never gotten a B, right? And I say, yep, and you're staying, because this is what the next level looks like, right? And I'm pretty sure Dr. Cotto sees that too when that kid is moved up from modified, or they go from JV to varsity, and now they're scared because it's harder and they have to work harder, and that's okay. So for me, the risk is them standing in that difficulty and persevering, but I always talk about being in the box of high expectation with high support, right? And so we want to ensure that we keep the expectation high for our scholars that are AP, IB, dual credit bound. And then we make sure that the support stays the same way, because they'll need it. And typically those kids can kind of do their own thing. School is easy. They're just been plugging through. You don't have to worry about them per se. So when they start taking those upper level courses, it's important for parents to check in with their teachers, check in with them to make sure that they are maintaining the level of rigor that they're used to, but also their own social emotional support, because that's a blow when you're used to, working at a high level in a Regents class or a local level class, and then now you have this added rigor that you're not used to. So that's the risk. The reward is all reward. Even if you are getting that C+ or a C or a B in that IB AP dual credit course, it's the rigor and what you have put yourself through that will always be the reward side to prepare you for the next level. Because the goal, if college is the goal, you are now preparing yourself. It's like if you're trying to lose weight, you got to do that first day on the treadmill, and it's hard, but eventually it'll get easier and you'll start to increase your days, right? And so for kids, we want them to not stay stagnant and to continue to increase the intensity of their education. The worst thing is to leave high school and have to go at the collegiate level, pay for it, and take high school courses. That is the worst thing that we could do for our kids, parents. So make sure that if they have the opportunity, and all kids should have the opportunity to take that next level course to build that academic endurance so that they can be successful at the next level.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Dr. Cotto, and it goes aligned with what Ms. Bliss was saying. How can parents continue to partner with districts in order to support their students through the NCAA clearinghouse process?
So I think it starts with communicating on both ends. I think starting with the athletic director, so we do have ADs within our buildings, and the counselor. So we have a network of at least 3 leaders within the school, coach, counselor, and an athletic director, along with myself here at central office, is continuing to have these conversations. I think on my end, we will do a lot of these Journey of a Scholar athletes presentations through virtually, which will provide families, and we'll record them as well, but it'll provide families with a lot more in-depth content to this journey as a whole. But ultimately, it's on us as well as an athletic department to make sure that we're communicating and having these conversations with our students, making sure that our students are empowered to engage in the conversation with counselor as well as athletic director. I would say even as early as elementary school, as I mentioned earlier, the earlier we can start the conversation, and I'm not speaking just for parents, but I'm also speaking for members in the community that are working with these young men and these young ladies that are gifted in that of sports and their athletic ability, but if they're gifted on the playing field, they're also gifted in the classroom. So the earlier that we can really start to have these conversations, even with those young men and young ladies that are participating at the elementary level, the better. We will be looking to do some things even at that 5th and 6th grade, just to again inform. The goal is to continue to inform our families of this journey. And it's just one kind of slice of a big pie. If we do things right on the athletic end of things, it's about 1/3 of our population within the district. And if it's done right, then that's 1/3 that walks that stage. That's 1/3 that goes on to college, and if not, a career pathway. And it's our responsibility to continue to engage in these conversations as a whole. But it does start as early as the youth. And I want to kind of put out there to the community I do have monthly meetings with community youth organizations as well, all of the youth sports programs within the community, but just looking to see how we can leverage the impact that we currently have with the young men and young ladies in our programs and start to network and work stronger together as a community, from city rec to youth programs to community programs, to district, it's vital to kind of build that web of support. Right now, many hands are touching our young men and our young ladies in reference to out of school opportunities. And if we can leverage that level of support and create a web, we won't have students fall through. So it is important that we just kind of work together as a community to move these young men and these young ladies off to big and to just some great things in their own, based on what they want to do and what they want to be.
Thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes left within our panel this evening. So we've gone through many of our questions, but I would like for our panelists, if you could all, I'm going to pose one question to everyone. If you can share your final thoughts about this one topic. If you could share with our audience one helpful tip or strategy that they can utilize in supporting their students through K through 12 into college and career and life beyond that, what would be one helpful tip or strategy that you would share with our audience from your perspective? And I'll start with Ms. Bliss.
Yes, call, email your school counselor. One tip, one easy tip, call, email your school counselor to say, introduce yourself, just to say, hey, just checking in. I want you to know I'm so-and-so's mom, I'm so-and-so's dad, I'm so-and-so's aunt, I'm taking care of them, whatever that is. Just send it out. It takes 2 seconds, and I promise you, you'll get a response.
Thank you. Next, we're gonna go to Ms. Jones, followed by Dr. Cotto.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get off mute. So my one tip would be to ensure that you set a schedule, okay? So, and that applies in a couple of places. You need to look on Parent Portal, see what's going on. Ensure that you set a schedule, help them stay on schedule. It applies to scholarship applications. When you're in your senior year and those scholarship apps are due, have a plan and set a schedule. It applies to college applications. Have a plan and set a schedule. So, I guess I'm saying two things. Have a plan for whatever it is that you're doing, and then set the schedule. You're going to have to hold them to it, because particularly in the senior year, things are hectic. And with them trying to keep up with school and trying to keep up with athletic and outside activities, and then it's their senior year, so they have all this other stuff going on. You're going to be the one to kind of help them make sure they don't miss key critical dates.
I'm next. So, I mean, I'd say communication, but connect the dots. I think for families who have students out in the community participating in a variety of different things, be strategic on those individuals that have an influential role in your child's life, a positive influential role, and connect those dots as they transition from elementary to middle, and then high school, and then on to college. I mean, those dots don't stop, because then those individuals should be that level of support. So I think, given where we currently are, it's extremely important to leverage the resources and the individuals that are playing a key role in your child's life, and have those individuals connect even with districts, so that we now create, as I mentioned earlier, a stronger web of support to guide and utilize the information. Because ultimately, I'll use sports as just an example. A youth coach impacts a child's life for 6 to 7 years before they transition into middle school. And they have a wealth of information in reference to how that young man or young lady operates. That's very important information to have as the young man or young lady transitions to middle school and then on to high school. Some of the work that I've done around sports aligns to just that. Many of our young men and young ladies have succeeded because of those individuals that have played a critical role in their lives as early as their youth and have stayed involved in their lives. So as you watch your child participate in any type of program that we have within the community, keep an eye on those individuals that are playing that influential role in their life, and keep them connected to your child as they transition from elementary to middle to high school, and ultimately even on to college. It is extremely important.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Fair next. If you can share from the student perspective, one helpful tip or strategy in supporting students or students as yourself, what worked well for you in getting through K through 12 and through, you finished undergrad and now you're in a master's program at RIT.
Thank you. One of the first things I want to say, Ms. Jones made a wonderful point that I want to reiterate. You mentioned the idea of keeping a schedule. In my high school and World of Inquiry, we all have agendas. And I know there are many schools in the district that also keep agendas they hand to students. That is something that I have done my entire life. To this day, I still have an agenda. I go through every day, I check my schedule, I know what I'm doing, I have my hours set up. I even go further in the day and figure out what I'm doing, well, further in the week and figure out what I need to have. Then having a schedule is one of the most transformative things you can have in your day-to-day life. It gives you a framework to really aspire toward. And you're a human being, and reality of that is that you're not going to fit it perfectly. But having a frame of reference and a daily expectation for yourself really is one of the best things you can do for yourself at a very young age. But as well, getting into my own personal advice after so much tremendous advice that's come earlier, I'd say one of the most important things as a student, speaking as a current student to the students listening, is ultimately have faith in yourself. You have to have faith in yourself and your journey to where you're going. And faith in yourself doesn't have to look at what you currently have available and saying this is enough. Faith can be looking at what you have now, looking at what you are going to achieve, and setting the goal to achieve those and having faith in your ability to follow through. That can look like you taking time to evaluate the village around you. A very common thing I was raised around, all of you have heard, is the idea that it takes a village to raise a child. And the village is not necessarily just who's at home with you, it's also who's at your school, it's the librarian at your local rec center whenever you go, if you end up going there. It's all of these different people. Ms. Jones made another point discussing David Haygood. David Haygood's an additional mentor of mine I've had my entire life, and people like him are the people in your life that really make it yours. They're the people who give you that empowerment, and ultimately it's that ability to look at your community around yourself and how that relates to you, and genuinely believing in your ability to make it better, and in doing that finding ways to ultimately make yourself better. And that's easier to say sometimes. I'm recognizing with COVID and current problems in our society, there can be a lot of nihilism. It's very easy to kind of think, oh, things kind of are stopped, don't really matter as much as they used to. But I promise you, faith in yourself is stronger than a pandemic. And you have to have faith in your ability to do that.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Myers-Smalls, if you can provide us with a helpful tip or strategy.
Sure. I think that the helpful tip I'd like to share is keep the communication open. And it's never too early to start talking about what your child is going to do after they graduate from high school. I remember as early as kindergarten, my parents talking to me just as simply as, hey, Les, what is it that you might want to be when you grow up? And they would also talk to me about, let's talk about what are the things that you are good at? What are the things that you enjoy? And that became, it increased as I became older. And so when I went into middle school, I was a Pittsford Mendon graduate, and I'm a proud 1987 Urban League Black Scholar. I did an internship actually at the University of Rochester and RIT, and I was paired up with mentors because I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. So I was paired up with the medical student, and then at RIT, because my dad was an engineer and he just swore he was going to have an engineer out of my sister. But I interned and was mentored by an engineer, and I decided that's something that I wasn't interested, but it was a good experience for me. And so what I appreciated is that my parents exposed me to many different individuals of what I thought I might want to be. And so I could have conversations early. And so it really proves the fact that representation matters, and it's hard to be it if you can't see it. So get your children hooked up with folks that if they say they want to be a doctor or a lawyer, please, I'm hoping somebody wants to be a superintendent one day. But just open up those opportunities, but also have the communication, because too many times I saw being a high school, when I was a high school counselor, is that students would come and say, oh, I'm going to go to a historically Black college. I want to go down south. And the parents are like, no, you're going to stay in state and you're going to go to a state school. So making sure that there are open and honest conversations about what is possible, what you financially can afford as a family, and what you're going to contribute to, I think is important. And doing that earlier rather than wait till the senior year and a student's, hopes are crushed, or they don't realize that what's not on the table as far as what the family is interested in doing. But keep those open lines of communication, and parents also don't be afraid if your students say something that might be not what you want them to be. And that's what I was grateful, because my parents did panic when I said a couple of things. I was like, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, I wanted to be a garbage collector, and I wanted to be, I wanted to go into space. But then when I realized going into space meant engineering, I was like, no, I'm all set with that. But they cultivated all of my dreams, and I was really grateful for that. And I landed exactly where I was supposed to be in education. But it's because they told me I could be anything I wanted to be, and they supported that.
Thank you so much to our 5 panelists this evening for sharing your insights and expertise. Next, we're going to pass it back over to Ms. Khadija Muhammad.
Thank you all for participating. Ms. Evans, for moderating. You are awesome. I think the wealth of knowledge that we learn from all of you in your positions will resound with us. We will be able to share this opportunity. And again, I just thank you guys for agreeing to be a part of this panel. This is a very strong panel that we may have to get back together to do some other things. So look out for those emails. Yeah. And lastly, I just want to pass it over to Mr. Timothy Johnson from the Urban League Black Scholars Program to close us out.
So before Tim jumps on, I'm going to embarrass you, Khadija, because this is proof positive. I was Khadijah's high school counselor. And so I have known her for a very long time. And I think we're proof positive of the positive impact that a school counselor student relationship. Now we work together at central office, and she's an educator and she's giving back. But we had lots of open and honest conversations, and I could not be prouder of who she's become and what she's doing and contributing back to our students and to our family. So I just have to put that little plug in, Khadija. I'm a proud mama bird.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Khadija.
Johnson.
Okay. Thank you all, the panelists and the volunteers behind the scene who was taking on the questions for that wonderful discussion. On behalf of the Urban League of Rochester's Black Scholars Program, I want to thank the Rochester City School District Office of Parent Engagement for planning this event. I also want to thank Dr. Leslie Myers-Small. She's a lifetime friend of the Black Scholars Program. She helped me transition into this position 5 years ago, and to this day, I still hold a lot of gratitude for her direction when I took over this position. Last, I want to thank Shawanda Evans from Monroe Community College for being tonight's moderator. This concludes the College Readiness and Parent Virtual Workshop for October 2020. This coming Friday, I will email participants the links to all the 4 workshops events that we held, and also a survey to help us improve our virtual events. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a pleasant evening. Thank you.